afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second Creative Dialogues of the season, Reopening the Arts. We are delighted to have here with us Faisal Al Hassan, Head of Warehouse 421 in Abu Dhabi, Reem Saleh, Associate Director of External Relations of the Art Center at New York University, Abu Dhabi, and Reshma Mehra, the Deputy Director of Alserkal. Before we begin, please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Jian Kim, the Event Specialist at Al Qasmi Foundation, and here I have with me today.
My name is Safat bin Bashar. I'm the Art and Culture Manager at the Al Qasmi Foundation.
And we are excited to be hosting this session today. Before we start our webinar today, I have a few housekeeping items to cover about this webinar platform. If you have a question for our speakers, please ask it through the Q&A tab on the bottom of your screen. We will be answering the questions at the end of the session. If we don't get to your questions during today's webinar, we will make sure to follow it up afterwards. The session will be conducted in English today, but feel free to ask any questions in Arabic if you prefer that. Also, on the top right of your screen, there is an option for you to choose how you want to view the webinar. You can adjust it to see all the speakers at once with the gallery view, or only the person who will be talking based on your preference with the speaker view. So if we are ready, let's start.
Let's start. Thank you very much, Gina, for the introduction, and we thank also our special guests for today. So I'm going to start with the first question for our webinar today, which is, how was the pandemic and the past lockdown affect and influence the way you supported your artists? So maybe we can start.
I'll be a gentleman and leave it for the ladies to start first.
Well, I can start. Well, it's been an extremely difficult year, and it still is, and everything changed, and the way we see arts changed, especially when we moved online. The artists have suffered so much. Some of them have lost 1 or 2 years of livelihood, and we didn't want to be part of this, especially those who are working in the performing arts and everything closing down. So when we went to virtual, or when we decided to move to virtual, we started having these honest conversations with the artists. Really honest, transparent conversations on their situation, also internally. And we continued, we needed to stay connected, not only with our audiences, but also with the artists, and continue to have them feed their creative work. So we continued commissioning. This didn't stop. We've been commissioning for the last 6 years, from the beginning of the Art Center. We continued to do that during lockdown, and when we went virtual, we continued to connect through off-the-stage events with our communities, through community dinners, class visits, school visits, and the last thing that we've recently launched, which is also kind of a natural development of these conversations with the artists and what's happening and what do we need to do to support, not only via commissioning. So we're launching the NYU Development Program, which is the latest program by the Art Center at NYU Abu Dhabi, to also support artists who are not probably yet ready to be commissioned, but at the same time who are at the beginning of their work, and they need support throughout the year to develop their projects and their skill and be part of the ecosystem here in the UAE. So it's a continuous conversation on how we can, develop ourselves and continue to stay connected with the artists, especially in those difficult times.
I mean, I think I would agree with Reem that it is actually a continuous conversation. It's always about, I think, that agility. I think something that really came to the fore during COVID was that all of us really had to be very agile and had to be able to pivot really quickly to accommodate the changing needs. And the changing needs, not just from a governmental perspective and from an operational perspective, but also, which would obviously apply to health and safety, but also the changing needs of the artists, of the consumers, of the audiences. As Alserkal, while we're here for the artists, we also have to bear our community members and our creative entrepreneurs in mind. And for us, it's in March when we went into lockdown last year, which was a very difficult time for so many. Our immediate response, the knee-jerk response, was really to think of how we could support them and support the galleries in the absence of an art fair that was really pivotal to their, to their sustenance, and how we could really keep things going for them and keep things running. And we really, at that point, we'd taken all of the gallery shows online in a matter of 10 days, launching what Alserkal Online at the time, which would later become a sort of almost like an experimental playground for us to really inform what Alserkal Online is today. And I think that in that first pivot to the digital space, to sort of realizing a space that really is led by the creative community, sort of responding to, allowing them to respond to pertinent questions and, pertinent subjects and topics that they're dealing with now that are very relevant to this time and that are timely, I think is really one of the ways that we've addressed this.
Yeah, I mean, I would second exactly what Reshma was talking about and Reem previously. I think it was a very, testing year for everyone, and especially for the, creative practitioners that we work with and engage with on daily basis. We had to shut down for about 6 months, so that impacted our exhibition program and our public programming. However, I think, the key words here is agility and flexibility, and the ability to pivot immediately and to react to the current situation that we were in, and to try to figure out, creative ways of doing, what we do. The first thing that we started looking at is, now that we cannot do a lot of programming in space, how can we, make better use of the resources, the financial resources that we've allocated for that. And we started a revival fund for projects that had been severely affected by the early days of the pandemic. So that was one of the first things that we started to look at. And then obviously, as a non-commercial space, our priorities are quite different than our galleries. And so our focus was mainly on how to continue to support creative production and, the sustainability of that cycle for the creative practitioners. Most artists and designers, creative practitioners, unfortunately work only, on commission basis or open calls for exhibitions, etc. And with that, coming to a sudden halt, you can see how that, affected their day-to-day life. And that's why we started looking at how can we, continue to make impact on day-to-day for these creative practitioners without them having to answer to an exhibition in the traditional sense. We had started working on a residency program that was supposed to launch in space last year. And obviously, because of the pandemic, we had to put a stop on that. However, we immediately figured out a new way to present that residency program in a remote setting, so that the production cycle does not stop. And actually, it proved to be a very successful module because it allowed us to reach 7 different artists from around the region and connect them with mentors and interlocutors that are based all over the world. So it did provide an opportunity for us to link a lot more people in a different way than the physical experience would have allowed.
Well, so now that we are in a stage where we are still kind of using digital platform, but also the UAE is slowly opening up in-person events. How has your institution adapted to the post lockdown situations, and what kind of creative measures have you guys taken in order to adjust, to this post lockdown to ensure the safety of all visitors and the artists?
I could sort of start with this because, for us here in Dubai, I guess we came back to work in June of 2020. and the avenue was open. So all of our community members were open, and while initially, you know, most of our programming was online, we had, you know, quite a lot of programming on Alserkal online, including How Will We Return, which really sort of spoke to the very specific, very timely topic of returning post-COVID, you know. But that, I mean, but beyond that, I think once the weather started getting nicer, we are actually very fortunate. We have, you know, large outdoor spaces that we really did take advantage of, and, you know, working with our community members, collaborating with them to bring programming to people while keeping social distancing measures in mind. I think it really did. It was actually very, very well received. So I mean, you know, so when you talk about adapting to this new normal, our new normal was pretty much business as usual, and perhaps even more intense than what we knew to be normal before the pandemic. So I mean, our audience numbers are up compared to 2019 even, you know. So there is, I mean, I think part of that obviously goes back to the fact that we don't, you know, there's a lot of people that are here, that we have captive audience now, where before people could just fly out for a weekend, they could leave, they could travel often. They can't do that anymore. So what we're left with is people who are here that are hungry for, you know, cultural content, that are hungry for opportunities to connect and for cultural exchange. And so that, I mean, from that perspective, I think that we're actually, you know, there's a lot that we've seen over the last, you know, that we've done in terms of in-person programming, sort of starting, I would say, from October, even before, from late September last year, because we opened the season sort of end of September last year with Alserkal Lates, and it was an in-person event, and we were very much buoyed by the audience's response, by people's reception, and the fact that they really felt safe to come to the avenue, and continue to feel that way because the numbers just keep increasing.
I think we also had, you know, a privilege of taking advantage of outdoor spaces with our Russell Time of Finance Festival. Yeah, and it's true. I think people have been wanting to go to in-person events for so long that when our festival happened in February to April, we did see a lot of, you know, people come in. But I think since Abu Dhabi, I think must be quite interesting because we know that they have stricter measures there, and especially, you know, the Art Center and Warehouse 421 are both indoor spaces. So what kind of measures have you guys taken?
I mean, I'll start if you don't mind, Reem. You guys are still in virtual, so for us, it was actually quite different than the experience at Alserkal. Things are a little bit quieter, and as you said, I think there's you know, the measures that we have to follow in Abu Dhabi are quite stricter. However, I think in general for us at Warehouse 421, you know, I've said that, you know, people kept calling 2020 is the year of resilience, and 2021 is the year of you know, openness or return to normalcy. I think 2021 and 2022 will probably be years of experimentation. You know, we need to kind of look at the long-term effect of COVID. Yes, the immediate reaction of people was to go back to what we call normal. But I think as we see this virus developing and new strains and mutations, I think people eventually will start to feel a little bit different about you know, being out. You know, human beings are social beings. That's something that will not change. However, I think the physical experience has to be adapted, and that effect is we're not going to see that today or tomorrow, but that's going to be in the long term. I think people are interested in coming to see our exhibitions, and our numbers have continued to be, you know, close to normal, especially with how things are different in Abu Dhabi. However, the linger time, we see that it's not as long as before. people are not very comfortable to be in an indoor space for a longer period of time. So now it's about how do you create a holistic experience between the physical experience in the space and what else can you provide on the digital realm? How can you expand that experience? How can people engage in discourse beyond the physical and the time space with these with the programs that we put on? And I think that would be, in general, a positive outcome in the future, in the long run, because it will allow us to connect with a wider network of people. It will allow conversations and discourse to continue beyond the period of an exhibition, per se, and it will connect a lot more people together.
Okay.
How about you, Reem?
Well, from our end, Faisal mentioned that we are still online, but we are part of NYU Abu Dhabi, and we also abide by the rules of the Ministry of Education. But it doesn't mean, and as Reshma said, doesn't mean that we weren't working. We were working even more. We were as busy as we could get, and Faisal said it really beautifully, is that we had to reinvent ourselves in so many ways. Bill Bregan, who is here, who is the executive artistic director, says we are not moving online, we are becoming an online performing arts center, which means we are literally experimenting. That's one big thing that we're all been doing, but also trying to engage with our audience and keep it really personal, a little bit differently. And we have micro theater, one-on-one experiences, like 600 Highwaymen, where two strangers will talk on the phone. So there was a reshuffling of, okay, how can we move online and stay connected, and probably not also think of ourselves as just a transition. It's reinventing everything from the beginning. And yeah, we've been as busy and we still are, and we've learned a lot from this experience. And there's a lot that we will take, hopefully, with us once things go back to normal, and we don't know what normal means anymore. This is also another big debate. What does normal mean? But we were having these conversations of, because as Faisal also mentioned, we've connected with each other here in the country differently, with our audiences differently. We've expanded also our reach, and we don't want to lose this later on. So thinking of maybe going hybrid at some point, how can we develop on what we've learned from this experience and keep it with us? It's a continuous experiment, one that also kind of reaffirmed the role of arts and of our organizations and of what we do, and our responsibility towards not only the artists, but also the community and our audiences.
I just want to add something here. I think the funny thing about COVID and what it did is, it literally just pulled the rug from under the feet of institutions when it comes to measuring impact. We always relied on numbers and footfall, and that, the pandemic has proved that this is not the only or the best way to actually measure the impact of what you do. Yes, it is important to see people walking into your space, but that's not the only way. That's not the best way, I would say, for you to keep a lasting and long-term impact on the people that you engage with. And I think it was a wake-up call for institutions all around the world, arts institutions, that looking at these numbers is just not the only way to measure your success.
Absolutely. Sorry, go ahead, Reshma.
Go ahead, it's fine.
No, it's so true, because not only this, you can see it also from the feedback that we get from our audiences, or also when we do class visits or other workshops. Not only the importance, but also, first, you cannot measure it the same way that you would do it if you're in a physical space and count the number of people that are going in. Sometimes you do things and you would have one viewer, but there are 5 people watching or a family watching. So that's one thing. And the other thing, the impact is different. We had personally a lot of one-on-one experiences. So they were not made for a large crowd, but the impact became not only measured differently, but also important. And we got this from really heartwarming feedback. It's like, we needed this. We needed to feel engaged. We needed to feel this personal connection. And definitely it will change forever, I guess, the way we measure things moving forward.
No, absolutely. I think there's also something to be said for the fact that the sort of transition to digital, or the inclusion of digital in our offering as arts institutions, or institutions in the arts, was already underway. I think the technology was already there. It was, it was a question of us having to catch up and having the rug pulled out from under our feet, sort of forcing us to make that leap and to do it almost like very quickly, without planning, without really having the chance to sort of get all our ducks in a row. It's in some ways, from an operational perspective, I'm sure you guys will agree with this, it was kind of liberating, because you didn't have to think about what would go wrong, because you just had to do it. It was, there was I think, and we had to do it not just for the artists, or in our case for our community members, but also, like you said, Reem, about making sure that we continue to fulfill the promise that we've made to our wider community, to the community that attends our events, that comes to our programming. So, I mean, I think we're still trying to figure out what the best way to record that impact is. I mean, I think possibly the only really true measure of impact is when someone sort of puts it down in writing, or calls you and tells you that you made a difference in their lives, because just as much as footfall numbers don't really tell you what the experience each person entering a space had, in a similar way, when I look at or when our team looks at numbers of visitors or unique page views or visits to Alserkal online now, we just know that there have been, say, 15,000 or 17,000 page visits or visitors to the site. It's difficult to tell what experience they walked away with. And so I think with time, we'll really need to look at, we'll have to sort of find a way to gain a deeper understanding into what kinds of impact we're making on people. And, to really find a way to engage with them, not just through our digital platforms, but also in person and in other ways.
I mean, as an audience perspective, being in Ras Al Khaimah, I remember attending one of the art center events, because I think a lot of them are during the weekdays, and then being in Ras Al Khaimah, it would have been a little difficult to actually drive down there, but having the online platform allowed me to just watch it, and enjoy like a concert at my house, which was amazing.
And actually, I do agree with my colleague Jiyoung. Actually, a lot of events, especially that when you work and you finish work, especially if you're in another Emirates, and actually this is one of the things that I do personally enjoyed some of the webinars, especially when it comes to the art scene, that it makes it so close, especially if you're attending for 1 hour and coming back. Actually, I noticed during the pandemic, we attended a lot of art webinar, and which actually we learned a lot. And also during our Ras Al Khaimah Finance Festival, we noticed that we had this also, it was a little bit of a stress, I think, that how you're gonna work with the audience, and what would the audience need to be there for you. But actually, we noticed the same as I think you mentioned, Reshma, that people were attending, and I think people weren't just not scared, but people were they're used to digital, it's nothing to stop them. It's just, I think, the way that we are handling our events has been changed, which actually this will take me to my second question, which is more about digital. So what is your opinion about digital yes, sorry?
Yeah, go on.
What is your opinion about the digital subscribes and in the arts, where were you able to reach new visitors,
who couldn't travel to your spaces or cultural centers? Did you have any audience from abroad?
How was it?
So I'm just gonna, so earlier today I was looking at, I was just looking at Google Analytics as you do. And I found that, I mean, funnily enough, the highest amount of time spent on Alserkal online, every time I look at Google Analytics, it always surprises me because it's always from a country that I don't think we've had much connection to, or, we haven't really necessarily published anything or published any works by any artists or any cultural practitioners that might be related specifically. So but I find that, last month there were people from Argentina, 3 people specifically from Argentina who'd spent over 15 minutes on our website. Now, I don't know, so I couldn't tell exactly, I didn't drill down to see exactly what stories they were on or what pages they were on. But it's really interesting that would happen. And then this month there's, countries as diverse as Azerbaijan, and going right from Azerbaijan all the way to Costa Rica. So it's sort of, I mean, I think it really does allow, I think the digital platform allows for outreach to and connection to people that one would never have imagined before. And that's just a really exciting place to be, for us as an institution, but then also for artists, for cultural practitioners, and for audiences, because if you have a webinar, to be able to communicate or exchange ideas with people so far, far away from you, I think is it's really quite an exciting proposition, I think.
Reem, maybe, would you like to answer?
Yeah, well, I second actually everything that Reshma said. There are a lot of things that can only be done online. And one of the most important things are collaborations on an international level. I mean, at the Art Center, if you're here in Abu Dhabi, you can attend some of our events. If you're further in another emirate, you would need to kind of travel. So this kind of allowed us to reach a wider audience and to have new and different partnerships that we wouldn't normally be able to do if we were just in the physical space. And we've been, like for Rooftop Rhythms, for instance, it has been featured in CNN. Some of our events were featured in the New York Times and added to the calendar of things that you need to watch in New York over the weekend, for instance. So this expanded our reach, but what's more important for us is also the accessibility. I mean, there are people who would not normally be able to attend our events, or who think that they are, very specific to a certain type of arts, and who now have a door to kind of see for themselves and attend, and don't feel that it's only exclusive for certain practitioners in the art, and decide for themselves how they feel about this kind of art. And there's also the immediate feedback that we got and that we get through our live events, in the comments on Facebook when we have a live event, and you see people reacting and sharing where they're coming from, and they're from all over the world, which is really exciting also to see how they see our work and how it is interpreted to them, even if they come from a different place. And this also kind of also reaffirms the fact that during these times we were all connected. We were sharing a collective trauma. We were sharing a lot of collective experience. And this could have only been implemented online to be able to witness that.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I guess I'm going to direct this to Faisal. What shifts have happened in the UAE art sector due to the challenges during the pandemic?
I think the pandemic has helped open up a lot of conversations about some of the challenges that we face here in the art scene. First and foremost, emerging creative practitioners in general were the first to get really impacted by the pandemic when it comes to obviously to our sector. I'm not talking in general, but the artists were the first to be impacted and impacted greatly, and that goes to show how the fragility of the situation that they are in. Most artists, don't have studio spaces to work out from. It's very difficult. It's very expensive to have a studio space. And most artists respond directly to invitations for submitting work for exhibitions. So that sustained creative practice for these artists, to be working all year long just to improve their art practice was one of the first things that we've noticed from conversations with our community, that this is the first thing that got impacted. I think at the same time, you can see on the positive side how the art community, the institutions have all come together, and we started having long and meaningful conversations about what is needed to improve the cultural landscape that we work in, and it was great to see how institutions reacted immediately. The Jameel Art Center immediately launched a fund to support artists. The Ministry of Culture, obviously, the work that they did was absolutely incredible. But I think there's a lot for us to actually learn from this experience and to try to improve things in the future. I think creative and cultural production has to continue beyond physical experiences, beyond exhibitions, beyond concerts. We need to find a better way to work with creative practitioners in the future for them to be able to sustain this as a living.
We've been noticing that a lot of, like what Faisal said, that a lot of, I think, art institutions started supporting grassroots organizations more, like in the arts. And how about you, Reshma? Sorry, what's your opinion on this?
Well, I mean, I think I agree with Faisal. I think it's difficult not to in that regard, but I think I would take it further to say that I think what this has also woken us up to is the power of collaboration between different institutions and what we can do together. It's the sum of parts being stronger than anyone by themselves. And at Alserkal, we've always been very collaborative. It's always been sort of part of our ethos to collaborate with institutions. We've partnered with institutions within the UAE for as long as we've been around, but also internationally. And I think, over the past year, the efforts to collaborate more sort of with a longer term vision in mind, with more with a view to really impact that, to really bring positive impact as much as we can to the artist, to the practitioner, is really something that we've started to do much more than ever before. It's a really, and I think it's important that we start across the board, and it's not just for institutions in the UAE, but institutions around the world, really start working together to see what impact we can create. Because it's really, the world is our oyster then, because you really there's no limit to what good we could do with that,
That's very, and actually I was just gonna ask in terms of what we're talking about, and especially when it comes to bringing a new audience, let's say, what is the role of the art in time like this? Like, how can the art help in overcoming with this crisis?
That's a big philosophical question.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't have enough time for that answer. We should, we'll need to extend this for at least a couple of hours.
I mean, yeah, exactly. It's a very existential question. I mean, if we just think about everything that we've done while we're in lockdown, while we're at home, has involved a designer or a creative or an artist to come up with, from the film to the games to the food to everything that we were, we literally were relying on creative practitioners on day to day to keep us, moving, to keep us sane, to keep us, alive. And not in that dramatic sense, but like just to keep our mental stability. We rely on that and day to day, and people are not, you take that for granted, don't see that every day.
Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I think it, it really works to dispel that sense of isolation, which I think took hold in a way during the pandemic in ways that we never imagined before. That sense that we are somehow disconnected from each other, that I mean, aside from the fact that we couldn't meet, it was really, I think art really gives us that collective ability to try to come to grips with what we're experiencing. Sort of, going back to what you were saying earlier, Reem, about this, like, we've all had this sort of shared suffering, if you will, and I feel like in some ways that does break down the sort of brings down the barriers. It breaks down those barriers that might have been there before, because I feel like, having, even if I've never met someone before, I feel like there is a commonality there. So we've been through something together, and I think we don't realize just how many things involve a cultural practitioner in order to see them come to life. So yeah, I think it's a very, I think art in general is just is a necessity. So, and I think we've realized that over time.
We're talking the same language, and again, we can go for hours talking about the importance of art. It's food. It's literally food. It's food for the soul. We cannot and we will not be able to survive without it. This is how we process our emotions, and we've witnessed this even more during the pandemic. We needed to laugh. We needed to cry. We needed to share that experience also collectively. So going back to what Reshma said as well, it is a necessity. It is not something that we do extra in our lives. It's how we're wired to share and to experience and to process how we feel. So, and the pandemic kind of reaffirmed the fact that, yeah, we cannot survive without it.
And I think I would add, during even the pandemic, there's a lot of institutions and also art foundations that actually offered courses in art, like for mental health, and which actually was very, very, I think, very helpful for a lot of people, especially that you could take your course while you're at your residence. And actually also we noticed that people were also, like, universities were offering from the, like professors were offering courses for people, and which I think it also add the value of art in our daily life. I think that was very impressive.
Yeah, I think it also kind of like, helped us redefine what art is. I think for me as well, before, I guess, although art is a very big word, it was very easily just, defined as, I go to an exhibition, we go to a museum, we see performing arts. But I feel like, when Reem brought up like art is like food, and I saw so many like, I think Alserkal that had some events, with related to food and art, and I think literal like physical connection between food and art. And I think it just helped us to, or like from an audience perspective as well, like it really helped me to see like, oh, like this can be explored this way, art can be defined in this, in this sense.
And also, I think there's some, also while we're doing our final festival, we saw some courses that they do art for like pets, for dogs, and actually it opens the wide of, as Jiyoung said, art is not a gallery that you just attend, or a photo that you just look at, but it's more widely than that.
Yeah, so I guess it goes to our last question before we go to Q&A. What do you think are some of the long-term effects of the pandemic in the art industry? I know that we've been talking about how, it's been shifting, but
Yeah. I think we've talked about that. I think there's if I say that I know exactly what the answer is, then I'll be lying. But I don't think anybody knows what the long-term effects are going to be. But I think that hybrid model between the physical and the digital is going to be something that will continue with us for a long term. I think the pandemic has opened our eyes to what the digital capabilities can support us with the work that we do, and provide a much wider network of people that you can reach out to and work with, learn from, and teach. I think that's what we're going to see more and more of, is that the hybrid model, I think.
Yeah.
I would say, I mean, I would agree with Faisal entirely. I think there's, we have, digital is here to stay. It was on its way, and before COVID happened, and it was already there. I think it's just now it's become a mainstay, and it needs to be. I think for a lot of institutions and organizations, we can't think of events only in the physical without. There is no planning without the digital in mind. And so even for us now, like we've launched this new digital platform that went live in April. It was the product of over a year's worth of work. And, it's in just the last 3 months, we've had more than around somewhere between 25 and 30 pieces of content by cultural practitioners, artists, writers, thinkers from around the world go live. And it's interesting to see how that experimentation, that sort of really turning things on their head, really sort of trying to find new ways of looking at things, new ways of communicating ideas, thoughts, is really, I think it's something that we all, hopefully we're all sort of doing now, but I hope that that's something that we continue to take into future years, that we don't drop that once we are given the all clear, hopefully, if ever. But that shouldn't go away, along with this sense of collaboration that we've all sort of found and are really sort of happy and excited to work together and come up with new projects and ideas. And I think that those should really be the things that we stick to in the long run.
I think they will stay. I think people do already see the benefit of that. We curated 2 shows remotely over the past year. Our curator for the year, Murtaza Valley, was in New York, and it was very difficult for him to be in Abu Dhabi with us. And he literally was curating the show remotely with the team, that we have in the space. Mais and Farah and Dana were, on calls with him continuously, and we opened and closed the show without him being able to see it, actually.
Oh,
yeah.
We partnered with Ras Al Khaimah Fine Arts Festival, with Alserkal online. Even Faisal also had his contributions. This wouldn't have been possible if we were not reconsidering how to see things once we are online. And there are lots. It's not how is it going to impact long term, because we really don't know the long term effect of the pandemic and the digital world, but we know, as Reshma said, it exists, and we know that we've experimented a lot with it. We now see things in a different perspective, the way we measure impact. We've built connections and partnerships and reached new audiences, students across the country that are in different emirates, and we definitely don't want to lose this. So yes, it's the hybrid, shifting to a more hybrid communication in the future, I think, is something that we're all seriously considering, because we saw the impact and we saw the need as well.
I think it's important to, if we keep people first, in our line of sight, the people that we are working for first, and allow ourselves to be open and vulnerable, allow ourselves to be experimental, and allow ourselves trial and error, and to embrace the error, embrace the failures, and learn from them for the next few years. I think this is the key for the success of institutions in the future. The times that we're living in are very what's the word that's failing? It's failing me. They're very challenging. They go up and down, and I think we cannot continue to work, in one straight line. I think we need to go up and down with the current and with what's happening, and try things and see if they work or not. That's the only thing that we can do.
Yeah, so I think we're talking about like open opportunities, and I think going back to previously what we talked about. So this is one of the questions from Q&A. So I know that we've talked about shifting away from football to define the success of each events or exhibitions. What are each of your new indicators of success?
It's a free.
Yeah,
it's open.
It's open.
Whoever wants to answer.
This question was actually from Bill Reagan. So maybe Reem, do you want to tell us what's the art center?
This feels like a Bill question. Actually, thank you, Bill, for the question. We spoke a lot about impact, and we also discussed the fact that we see things differently when it comes to measuring success. So now measuring success is not in terms of the number of people that would attend the event, but it's more about the impact on and Faisal, you said beautifully, is focusing on the person, on the emotion, on what is it that that helped the artists, but also our audiences. So there's a whole other measurement when it comes to success that is not based on anymore on the numbers per se, but more on how do we measure impact? How do we measure these little things that change, these little changes in people's lives that make it a little bit more easier for them to cope and to express themselves. And these are for me, one of the most important ways to measure success is hearing, Reshma, you mentioned having feedback, a WhatsApp message, an email, a comment. This is the impact. We had shown cartography online, which is a beautiful performance, and we showed it to students, and the feedback that we received from the students was so heartwarming. It was their immediate reaction to what it meant to them, to each one of them, and this is priceless. And this is literally means that we really need to shift the way we measure and stop thinking of numbers. Despite the fact that for the Art Center, for example, we've reached more than 1 million views during the last year for some of our videos, because the content also stays online. So this is great. Yeah, this is a huge success, but at the same time, this is not the only way we measure it, and we shouldn't.
And we started to see, we see a shift, at least with us, but I see it across the board in where we actually are spending a lot of our time and effort and financial resources. A lot of the, for example, the work that you guys have just started doing with Nemo, that's, that is a new measure of impact. How can you, make a lasting transformative change and impact into some, a few number of people, but it is a great impact. We've been, Warehouse 421, we're a physical space, so we put on exhibitions, but the way we started to look at how do we actually create a more lasting impact on the artists as they put up shows, so we started to, we put together a list of capacity and capability building programs, all related to exhibitions. We started a new grant program. The residency program changed. It's not exactly as you said. It's not just about the number of people, but how do you make a more transformative impact on a few, but that will be with them for the rest of their lives. One of this, for us, a major success story. We had a colloquium that we ran with the Bombay Institute of Critical Analysis and Research a few months back. And through the colloquium for 12 people, 2 people met, and one of them ended up getting a lecturing position in a university because of that program. That for me is a success story. That's for me and a lasting impact, because of a small program that we ran online.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with. I mean, it's really, for me, I feel like it's going back. Even with measurement or even with measures of success or indicators of success, I think that while our models in presenting or presenting support or finding ways to support artists need to become more hybrid, I think our approach to how we measure success needs to be hybridized as well. There is I think there's no getting away from the fact that a physical response from someone is the highest form of a measure of success. When someone sends that email or that text or that WhatsApp or a letter or whatever it is, just to say you made a difference to my life in this way, or there is actually a physical outcome, like a tangible outcome to something. I think that's obviously the highest form of it, but there are so many smaller and unmeasurable or unmeasured successes that we have in the work that we do. And and I think for me personally, when I look at what we do here at Alserkal Avenue, what we do it here at Alserkal, it's in seeing the same people or the same faces back in the avenue day after day. It means we're making an impact. We are creating some change there. It's seeing people, it is the people that come back repeatedly to our website because there is a positive impact happening there. There is, we see this with even through Alserkal Arts Foundation, which, where we're really sort of making our programming more participatory, making it so that the artists can really sort of take the driver's seat and sort of engage their community, the artistic community, to see how they might give back. And with programming like Feedback Loop, which is run by Lawrence Abu Hamdan, and it's really sort of the artists that come away from that and the experience that they have there, the feedback that they get from their peers is also something that, we see that there is a lot of the impact there is also measurable. So I think that it isn't an either or situation. And I don't think that it will ever be an either or situation.
I
think we find a way to see both.
As this conversation is getting very exciting, we have 10 minutes, so we're gonna answer a few questions and maybe we can answer them very shortly, like in 2 to 3 minutes, so that we can have more of the audience questions from the audience. So maybe Jiyoung.
Sure. One question was, would you say that supporting and growing team of creatives who enable the work of these artists by working with your organizations is as important as supporting the artists directly? How do you see yourself investing that?
So maybe we can.
Should I repeat the question or?
Yes, please.
It's a long question. Yes.
Yeah.
Would you say that supporting and growing team of creatives who enable the work of these artists by working with your organizations is as important as supporting the artist directly? So maybe like
Let's divide the
Yeah,
question.
yeah. So like compared to supporting a group or a team of creatives versus, I think, supporting like a group or organization that supports creatives versus supporting one artist or like artists themselves directly. I think that's what he's trying to ask.
It's very confusing, but
Yes.
if I understood correctly, I would say I think the last year has been a very important learning experience for us within the team that works at Warehouse 421. I think we've grown a lot in the way we think about programming and the way we think about supporting artists. My team is a very, very small team, and I'm very lucky to be working with 6 incredible women. Most of them are creative practitioners themselves. But it goes again to show that when you have people that are creative within your team, they can understand what it means to actually create a lasting impact and to support creative practitioners in general. And it allowed us to start to think a lot more collaboratively within the team and also externally. Collaboration has been, in our DNA from the very beginning. We're a small institution with a very limited number of people, and that will continue to be for the foreseeable future. We're not an institution that's invested in building a large number of people working with us and a large spaces, but rather we are investing in people and capabilities, and we rely a lot on collaborations and partnerships to do that. And I started to see the shift in the mentality and the way my team would think about things. I bring something to the table, and previously it was, this is beyond our capacity to do, and it now turned into, first of all, you're crazy. Second, who can we bring on, from our partners and friends to help us, develop that crazy idea in a very short period of time. I don't know if that answered the question, to be honest, but it was very good.
I mean, it's a Q&A, so I think whatever we get is the answer gonna be. But unfortunately, we're running out of time. We will share the questions that we had with our speakers today, and we will try to get back to them. I think we have 3 more questions, but we will answer them. We'll send it to you by email, and maybe you can answer them and we can send it back to our audience. So I would, thank everyone for joining us today for the Creative Dialogue, Reopening the Arts. We would like to thank the panelists today for sharing their expertise and experience reopening the art scene in the United Arab Emirates. We certainly learned so much. Faisal, Reem, and Reshma, thank you very much for this lovely and very interesting conversation. For those who joined us late, or if you know someone who would enjoy this webinar, this conversation, we will have the recording of this webinar posted on our YouTube channel and our social media platform soon enough. When you leave this webinar, a link will be sent to you for a survey on today's session. We will appreciate if if you could take 2 to 3 minutes to give us your feedback about today's webinar. And finally, if this is your first event with us at the Al Qasimi Foundation, please do not forget to sign with our mailing list to receive our newsletter and more information about our events. At the end, on behalf of the Al Qasimi Foundation, I would like to thank you very much, and thank you for joining us today, and have a lovely day. Shukran jazilan.